All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alan Badeau. I am the CTO for NCI, and I'd like to welcome folks to our LinkedIn Live event where we will be talking about creating animated personas for digital transformation. This will be the second live event that we've presented information on our animated personas, and we got a lot of good questions the last time, and I thought for this exercise, it would be good to bring in the creator of animated personas and one of our strategic partners, Mr. Richard Boyd, who is the CEO of Tanjo, and he's going to walk through a little bit more information around what personas can do, and we're going to provide a lot of different examples, this time, as well as, some food for thought for folks on how we can use these for a variety of different modernization initiatives. I do want to take a little bit of time to remind everybody to please type in questions into the text box, and as those pop up, I will politely interrupt Richard and moderate those and give him an opportunity to respond, or in some cases, I will add some color commentary as we go through some of these, and we've got a quick demo in here as well on how NCI is using some personas. So Richard, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Well, thanks, Alan. Good morning to you and to everybody at NCI who's joined, and the rest of you out there in LinkedIn/Zoom land. This has really been a compelling journey. We're happy to share the evolution of this idea and its genesis. That's what we're going to talk about a little bit here. About 5 years ago, and even a little bit further back, like how we sort of evolved this idea and how we're finding a lot of different use cases for this capability. So yeah, it probably helps just to start with how we originated this idea. And I always use this sort of slide. I call it my street cred slide, which is kind of my entire career on one page. Looking back at our team's experience working in computer gaming, going back to the 90s. So back then, we were creating these game characters, right? And we'd give them initially very simple behaviors, like, if you tried to attack them, they'd run away, or they'd try to fight you back, or evade you, whatever. But then as gaming progressed, we started getting into more complex characters. So today, if you think about games like The Sims or any of the other games out there today, you'll find that there are these rich sort of hierarchical behavior trees. Characters have rich backstories and lives. And that is sort of the genesis of this. And I think that'll be helpful as we go through the discussion, and all of you out there start thinking about ways you can apply this. And then I had a game company there for a while. We were taking game technologies and applying it to learning, called 3D Solve. You see in the center there. And this is after we did game companies with like Michael Crichton and Tom Clancy and Douglas Adams and others, and Ozzy Osbourne even. And only one of those people is alive. I'll let you guys ponder that for a second. But then Lockheed bought my company, and we started working in these large constructive simulations and building sort of simulations of entire countries, for example. So we'll talk about that and how that evolved. If you want to move forward there, Alan. And you can go past this too. That's just sort of some backstory about why we think all this stuff is important. But this is one idea that I've had around watching artificial intelligence and even machine learning evolve. I think of it this way. I think of it like, for those of you who are chess players, there's like 3 sort of stages of chess: the opening, the middle game, and the end game. I think the opening game was, us building technologies and then telling the machines what to do. In other words, if you wanted to build an expert system or some sort of logic system, you would have first a human would have to understand it, and we'd sit down and tell the computer what to do. And you'd have to really program all that finite state machines, that sort of thing. And now we're in this phase. So I just put it at 2009 when I first got religion on machine learning while I was working at Lockheed Martin, where all of a sudden now we need data scientists, because now it's not about just a human understanding it and then programming it. It's about getting lots and lots of examples. So the way we taught machine learning systems to play Atari games, or even to drive autonomous vehicles, was giving them lots and lots of examples. I mean, millions of examples, and letting them kind of infer their own understanding. So back in 2003 or 2004, it was, it would take thousands of hours of compute time for, in order to train an autonomous vehicle system. Today, you can let one of these sets of libraries actually just watch 100 hours of video of cars driving, and it can go out there and drive flawlessly everywhere except in Rome, is the joke I usually use. And then, I arbitrarily say in 2018, that's when we started looking beyond data scientists and more into behavior science, like thinking about, okay, how do we take this ability to harvest lots and lots of data, infer understanding from it, and then use that to address human behavior? And that's never been more important than it has been over the last year. One of the things I always say is, we've got biological viruses out there. They abound in nature. But what turns biological viruses into pandemics is poor human behavior, bad decision making. And so using this technology to address that is something that we've used. We'll try to touch on that during this session as well. But now we're in this realm of being able to take the data exhaust that all of us leave behind on the net as we buy on Amazon and we search on Google, et cetera, and try to use it in some benevolent ways, like I said, for better population health outcomes, and that sort of thing. But also, you'll hear Alan talk about ways to use it to address some of the cybersecurity threats maybe we have out there, or some of the adversarial issues we have around the world. So we're going to get into that a little bit. All right, next. You can go past this too.
Yeah, and Richard, I think for the audience, I think it would be beneficial also to explain how you and I define what an animated persona is, as opposed to what a traditional definition of a baseline persona looks like.
Sure. So again, when I was at Lockheed, we were making agent-based models of, for example, of the people in Afghanistan. You can create, or I'll give you another example. And this is where we've really made a big market for ourselves at Tanjo, is in the field of market research. So the typical or the previous model was, take a lot of data about consumers, for example, and then you would make these models of people that represent a large section of a population. Let's call one, iPhone mom. iPhone mom drives Volvo, has household income X, has 2.5 children, controls 80% of the household income, and buys things at these places. And that representative model would serve to, represent a large population of people. When we first saw that and saw how much money, $3 billion a year being spent in market research, we said, we can do a little bit better than that, because when we were modeling models of, all of Afghanistan, for example, at Lockheed, we wouldn't have, 5 or 6 sort of representative, simplistic, high-level models like that. We would have as many as we needed to represent every single individual set of unique views, cultures, traditions, points of view in that area, so that you could literally create that model of Afghanistan and then go, for example, to Helmand province and say, hey, what if we built a school for girls here? How are people going to feel about that? How many people will be okay with it? How many people are going to be neutral? And which groups are going to be so hostile that they might shoot Malali or burn the school down or bomb it? And that's really, really useful to understand the breadth and spectrum of the different opinions and points of view, and, like I said, values and traditions and sentiments. So what we're doing here is not just having and that's the other thing that they were doing before with market research, is you would basically have something that was on a piece of paper, right? So you'd spend $1 million with McKinsey or someone like that, and you might have like these 10 representative persona models that represented consumer behavior, and it was just on a piece of paper. So anytime you would go to do new marketing, start a new marketing campaign or introduce a new product, you'd take these pieces of paper out and look at them, put them down, and start working on your program.
Yep.
Even in the intelligence world, we would have these sort of models where they're kind of paper-based, where you're looking at, here's a profile of a person. The FBI might do that, or again, in the intelligence community, you would look at these profiles and study them and read them, and they're kind of static. And the idea behind animated personas is, again, we blend that gaming, that agent-based modeling capability that we learned about in the DoD and other environments. And now you can take these models, put them into simulations, and see how they react to different kinds of stimuli.
That's right. And that's exactly where our customers are seeing some of those benefits, and trying to bring those personas that they have on a one slick sheet piece of paper. We're trying to bring those to life. And I think they really see a ton of value in that.
And I'll comment on this slide since it's been stuck here for a while, but if you haven't read this book, it's a really important point is when many of you may have remembered when Netflix did their challenge, right? They put a couple $1 million out there and said, hey, we want a challenge to make better models of what people really want out of, the DVDs that we're sending them at the time. And what they learned is, and what we all know today, is if you really want to understand people, you don't do polls and surveys. You don't do exit polls. Exit polls didn't predict Donald Trump. They didn't predict Brexit or other major events. What does reflect who people really are, though, is data like what they do with their attention and what they do with their money. In this book, they talk about a whole host of things about, I'll save you from reading it, just say that the summary is that we humans make very poor witnesses to our own narratives. So even when we're trying to tell the truth, if I said, like, how many glasses of wine do you have a week, Alan, or how many cigars have you had in the last year, you would really think and go, well, only like one a night, and I've never had a cigar. Of course, Alan would never do that. But then we'd look and say, well, the data tells a different story. I'm looking at your grocery receipts. I'm looking at what's in your garbage. And so that's what we're doing, is taking like Nielsen data, other kinds of data, and feeding that in automatically using machine learning, and creating these synthetic representations of people's values, traditions, sentiments, interests, your interest graph, and then animating it. So that's what we're doing.
That's right. I try to be the lead character in my own story all the time, and oftentimes how I tell it, just like fish stories, it may not be exactly how the data shows it. So that's it is a fantastic book.
Right. So that's the idea. Is it comes from data. And here's an example of like some of the big agent-based simulations I talked about. We did at Lockheed, and that's, again, big part of our perspective is that you don't want just these 8 or 10 simplified models, which has been all the rage in market research and even in other kinds of profiling. We really want to make as many of these. In fact, I used to say, why not have 100, if I talk to a consumer marketing company, I would say, why not have 126 million models? Why do you have 9 or 8 ways of buying chicken? And what I learned, of course, is they're not, let's take the chicken example, because we did that for a chicken company. We found that, in fact, there are not 126 million uniquely or different ways to buy chicken, right? Or thinking about buying chicken, but it's not 8 either. Turns out it's about 42 if you're interested. And actually, we just kind of drew the line at 42 as a nod to Douglas Adams, but it's a much bigger number. And then the exercise becomes, okay, let's draw a circle around, for example, North and South Carolina. How many of those 42 different, unique, meaningfully different ways of buying chicken are there in this area? And therefore, what do I need to do with my shelf space and who I market to and how I price things, all that sort of thing. So that's the new sort of technology we're bringing into that industry.
Yeah, and Richard, just really quick, there was a question around the name of the book and the author. I did want to pop that slide back up really quick. It's called Everybody Lies, and it's by Seth Stevens Davidowitz.
Yeah, it's been out for quite a while, but yeah.
Yes, it has. All right.
All right. So, and again, what we're doing, the exercise of building these models is not just talking to a person and then making it, it's a synthesis of a lot of different data streams. That's where it gets really interesting. And notice that I kind of draw the line at 80%. So you start with just, if I'm modeling everybody in, Virginia, for example, I would take like their demographic data, which I can get, it's publicly available. Then I can get, maybe some Nielsen data about what kinds of TV programs do they watch, what are they buying with their, with their Harris Teeter, very important customer card, all that sort of thing. And that sort of blends together into this model of who these people are. Then the exercise is trying to refine it around a specific set of choices. And that's where we work with a company called Choice Flows with some of the people you saw there, Dr. Richard Carson from UCal San Diego, Dr. Jordan Louvier, who's in Seattle, Washington today, Kevin Clark from IBM, and took a lot of the work that they've done studying this, like how do people make choices about where they go on vacation, where they what sort of products did they buy, what kind of car do they drive, where do they live, and turn that into the models, which we can then use to predict behavior around specific things like buying chicken, and the more specific you can make it, of course, the more valuable it becomes.
That's right.
And then I never say it's 100 because people are still not, automatons, at least not yet.
That's exactly where I was going to go, Richard. A question that we often get is around, your persona can only ever be 80% accurate. And what's this unknowable persona details? And we try to explain to them that, we're starting with a baseline of 80%. As it continues to learn and it continues to evolve, of course, your persona is going to get more accurate as you see and it sees that data exhaust. And I think that's an important feature for folks to think about.
Well, I think the key is this approach more accurate in its predictions than previous methods? And the answer is absolutely yes, by a probably 3 sigma or something like that. The previous methods were more like 20%. And so we're just saying that we can refine this a lot more and get a lot more predictive. Right. The more data you have, the more complete your model is, the better you can predict that behavior. But still, for example, we did some work in the UK with a financial services company, and it was that all the data that we used to feed the model was before Brexit. And then they started asking questions like, how are our customers feeling about Brexit? And we're like, well, they don't have an opinion because it's not in the data. So we need new data around those choices and those behaviors because people are reorienting. And there's also a very key idea that we had in gaming also. You heard me say hierarchical behavior trees. The idea there is that people are not always in one state of mind, right? So people change state as they go through the seasons, as they go through their life. When you get married, when you have a child, when you face a pandemic, we all change state. So all of the predictive models from before weren't necessarily applicable. And that's where the human still comes in, the human behavioral scientist. And that's why I think that's an important capability today, or skill set, is coming in and trying to figure out and honestly guess a little bit, make an educated guess about these sorts of people. How are they likely to react to something like a pandemic and being sequestered and and quarantined and less mobile and all that, and how will that change their buying patterns, their behavior patterns?
Yep.
But that's part of the art of this. All right, so we've done a lot of these, and I'm gonna go through these real quick. Just the idea originally back in 2017 is we looked for people who had a lot of data about them, like Victor Hugo. And it's not just everything like the novels that he wrote and the poetry he wrote, but it was his personal correspondence, that sort of thing. Fed all that into the system, and we started with just a very simple, straightforward interest graph, like an interest graph you guys would all have on Facebook or LinkedIn. By the way, if you've ever looked at them, they're different. That's an interesting point. And then a sentiment model. And we first just released it on the web. Then we can go and see every day. And Victor Hugo still lives there on our servers. We can go see how he's reacting to the news. He's watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, reading stuff, and he's scoring everything. And by the way, his interest graph changed over time. We can talk about that. You can discuss amongst yourselves or ask about that. And if you want to go through some of these other examples, I mean, we have a whole host of these today. If you want to just click forward, Martin Luther King and a bunch of folks.
Yep.
George Washington. So one of the things that we found in HR is people want to take, famous people either from that business, from IBM, or you could have Leonardo da Vinci and folks like that, and have them actually serve as mentors to the people working in that environment. I think that's further down as well, Alan. If you can.
Yeah, and I think too, Richard. One of the things, can you touch on, with all the social media data that's available and folks having, of course, privacy concerns and PII. Can you touch on, the nice part about these personas and that they're representative, they don't contain PII and any kind of privacy information?
Yeah, I mentioned that one of the earliest projects we did was in the UK, and they already had GDPR in place. So there was already, and they said, look, anything we do, we cannot be using actual data. It's like, no, these are representative. You can make them as representative or abstract as you'd like. Like I said, initially I'm like, let's make one for all of the 126 million households in the US. Can we? Yes. Does that data exist? Yes. Can I give you a body mass index for every household in the US? Absolutely. Tremendous amount of data out there, but these things in the end, to be useful, they don't have to sort of reveal PII information. They just need to be enough. There need to be enough categories of it to represent all of the prevailing or meaningfully different moods and values and traditions and all that. So, and they're much more useful than those simplified models from before. And also, they change a lot. They can change with seasons, and I don't know if you can go forward to the one, that's somewhere where you can actually ask questions. You'll see that in some of our work, being able to post questions for governance. If you're trying to govern a group of people, what are the major feelings and opinions that I have in my community around something? We use that a lot in our work for COVID. We did for North Carolina and the state of Washington. And we ended up becoming a finalist in the X Prize for the Pandemic Response Challenge around this ability to model human behavior. What you're looking at here is a consumer marketing application where you can actually write your ad copy or your emails or whatever and see the reaction from your target groups of people in real time, like how, and it'll even recommend words and things that you can do that you can change to increase that interaction or appeal to the various folks you're trying to reach. So think about how important that is in government, or if I'm a governor of a state and I'm trying to get people to socially distance and wear masks and do things that are painful and difficult for some people to understand. What I need to do, and this is actually a great segue to some of the other things we've been doing recently, is if I can understand who those people's, first of all, what are their interests and their opinions currently? Secondly, who are their influencers? Where do they get their information? Can I get those influencers to repeat that information that I'm trying to convey? And how many messages is it going to take over time to convert them to the behavior that I'm looking for? And again, looking at benevolent sort of ideas here, like increasing population health, like eat healthier, exercise more, protect yourself from pandemic, viruses, that sort of thing. And we can turn that into a science where we can get people to understand through whatever path we need to get them or lead them along until they arrive at the point where however they get there, that they've got the optimum behavior we're looking for that is better for everybody.
Yep.
So there's another example. Stan Lee. I did this at a Comic-Con in Seattle 2 years ago. Right after he died, I was able to let the audience actually ask him questions. You see in there a live feed. If I have enough data about that person and it's May 26th, I can tell you the likelihood of this person to eat what kinds of food, what time might they be getting up, are they traveling, what are they doing right now, what are they likely to be doing based on the previous information. And again, that's subject to some change because, as they say in the stock market, previous results don't necessarily indicate what exactly is going to happen today, but it's a good indicator. It's a good way to look at this information and try to predict, what someone's likely to be doing. But being able to talk to them, see trends, I did this speaking tour across South America, where a lot of cultures there found it really interesting, this idea of being able to resurrect people who no longer are alive. So my dad died in 2017, and shortly thereafter, I decided, it didn't take me very long to decide that I'm going to make a model of him. And he still lives on the servers today. I've been interviewed by a bunch of different magazines. I think I'm being interviewed again coming up on Father's Day here to see where he is and what's going on. But the reason this is interesting is my dad did not have a lot of data exhaust. He didn't have a big Google footprint. He wasn't on LinkedIn. He wasn't on Facebook. He's not on Instagram. So I had to take, his military records, personal correspondence, and scan all that in. And then going back to my experience back in the 90s building games, I could hand code the rest of him. So I just have to keep myself honest and say, this was data driven, this portion of his persona. And the rest of it is really my version of him. So it's a shadow of him that really represents my view of him, but it's interesting and oddly satisfying and reassuring to be able to go and see him every single day and see how he's reacting to the news and even talk to him. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people say, why don't you make a company around that? And I say, someone else can do that. I'm not going to do it. But does it work? Is it interesting? Is it compelling? Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite ones that we've talked about in the past, Richard. I really do enjoy this one. So one of the things that I did want to show from an NCI perspective is just really quickly how we're using those. And let me launch the video really fast. And so, folks have heard about our Empower platform in the past. And we can launch these personas in a variety of different ways and automate that entire process. And so what I'm showing you actually is a persona from a training perspective that can be used to interact with different social media platforms and really either address, things like insider threat, cyber risk assessments, or if just additional marketing that you want some folks to be able to see what some potential responses are that they could get. Now, again, this is all in a training, environment, but you see one persona is out there that's saying that they think that the stock market is going to rally tomorrow. And we take that information and we can automatically populate it into a completely separate persona. And then you can start to get personas that will converse with each other, and you can have humans in the loop and watch how these sort of things are behaving. And you can see that the Taylor Ray persona has just put that information in there, and it's starting to drive what that next conversation is. And you can see that it's actually conversing with Jamie Little in this case, who is another stock expert and another persona that we had created. So you can start to see and understand how we can get multiple personas to interact automatically with each other and hold different conversations. And so from a training perspective, the value in that is you can start to watch what potential exhaust could be for a variety of different scenarios, create a whole bunch of different, training scenarios for your user base to allow them to understand some potential interactions and responses, whether it's a service desk, whether it's marketing, whether it's insider threat. It's that kind of activity that we can automate to allow that interaction to take place. This is a little bit of a long video, so I'm going to stop it there. I don't want to take any more time with that, but again, if folks have questions, then we can address those at the end. Richard, I'll go back to you.
Yeah, so and I definitely want to make sure we leave time for questions. I'm sure there are going to be a lot, but Again, as we think about the sort of application of this, and I always try to look at the benevolent side of it, but of course there are, darker sides of what's possible with this technology. Like any technology, it's a double-edged sword, but we try to cut in the positive direction. Here's an example that I think hits home for a lot of folks. And I usually, if I had a live audience in front of me, I would ask, how many of you have eaten kale in the last, 3 years? And pretty much all the hands would go up. And what's interesting is about 7 years ago, the #1 buyer of kale in the United States was Pizza Hut. And it wasn't for eating, it would just go on the ice around the food on the salad bar.
On the salad bar, that's right.
Nobody was eating kale in the United States. Very few of us were. In Germany, where I used to live, we had kohlrabi, and you would eat it a lot there, but there was no market for it here. So this group got together and they created the American Kale Growers Association, which just had a membership of one, which was this PR agency. And they used technology like this, which is, again, first decide who do you want to target, who can you target, and you start by profiling people using social media and that sort of thing, and figuring out, who is susceptible to our message. Now, you don't bother with people. This is called base and swing, right? You don't, if you've got people really entrenched on one side or the other of an issue, like you're not going to make a Democrat a Republican or a Republican a Democrat with one well-crafted email. It just isn't going to happen. But those people in the middle, you can sort of craft a campaign, and it's not, again, still not one message. It's about, okay, how do I get a micro agreement? Like, darker green vegetables are slightly better for you. The second message might be, yeah, but kale tastes really horrible. Third message might be, yeah, but Rachel Ray has this great recipe for it where it actually tastes pretty good. And then you start bringing in the influencers. And that's where it gets interesting, where you get Gwyneth Paltrow to talk about it and release a cookbook. And there's a campaign around this that all of a sudden, this is an example that showed, like, this happened in about 3 years. All of a sudden, kale was on every menu. We're going in and demanding, massage kale with a neutral carbon footprint in every restaurant. And it didn't even exist a few years ago. It was manufactured using this capability. So again, applying it to which we're very interested in both NCI and Tanjo, is applying this to better health outcomes for populations. Not just during pandemic, but generally, like, how do we help people understand their healthcare journey and that kind of thing? And how do we message that to them over time? But again, it's about influencers. How are people getting their information? And then crafting it with the right wording and the right micro agreements over time, until all of a sudden you can move someone from iceberg lettuce is fine to demanding kale.
That's right. And just again, so people can remember, you can test those messages with these personas, right? I mean, you saw earlier where you can write some sort of information in there, and one persona may not be interested at all, but you change it a little bit, and that same persona can then become extremely interested. And so, that's the power of this tool, that every single message that you want to send out can be can be put against these personas to see how that demographic is going to react.
Yeah, I saw some of our DARPA folks on the guest list here today as well. So I'll just say, DARPA's mission originally was, avoiding technological surprise. One of the things we like to do with this technology is avoid information surprise. Yep. Right. So, or communication surprise out in the market. So think about, United Airlines, when they had, not to pick on anybody in particular, but I've already said it. So, they had some issues with dragging people off flights a couple of years ago, if you remember that, really strict policies. And then the president released this message out there, which was really like, that should have been run by some personas first before he did it, because it really created more of it was like putting gasoline on the fire and created much more negative reaction. So this would allow you to actually test with your market, test these ideas first with these synthetic population models before you go out there and start saying something where you're surprised by the reaction, because you didn't understand all the points of view there.
That's right.
All right. And again, this just shows, like, we're modeling things to figure out, like, I like to think of the gravitational pull of, I want everybody being over here. You can think of it as Coke versus Pepsi or whatever. What do I need to do? Because most of these things aren't happening in a vacuum. What are my competing messages, the competing narratives that are out there? How often are people being hit with those? And what do I need to do to keep people pulled into my gravitational orbit around where I really want their behavior to be, whether it's keeping my customers there or keeping my, if I'm mayor of a city during a pandemic, how do I keep the groups of people I have that I'm governing feeling pretty positive about how I'm leading. So there's a lot of different applications here.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I think, this will be a good case for most of us that we've been experiencing this over the last, almost 18 months. I mean, with the COVID simulation. So, Richard, why don't you explain a little bit how this one even got started?
Yeah, so we, again, we were collecting a lot of data. We were thinking about everything we just talked about there, about how do you actually move people's opinions over time. And we're still playing with a lot of binary thoughts here. So you've got, the stay at home on the left, you've got the, go party, and we don't need to follow any of these, let's do herd immunity, viewpoint. And again, there was a lot of people on both camps. So what we can do here is actually model. There's 1,000 little dots in the middle. Each one of those can represent 10,000 people or 1,000 people or whatever. And that's actually the infection rate in the middle. On the left is at the top, it's one set of narratives around you don't need to socially distance. There's no point in wearing a mask. Let's just achieve herd immunity. And then at the bottom, it's another set of, which is no, let's actually do this. Let's try to socially distance, wear masks, take all these precautions. And you see the competing narratives. And again, the people in the middle, those 10 in the middle represent each, 100 people in that larger, or 100 models in that middle section. And it could be even more, whatever we're trying to represent. But those 10 predominant views are right there. And as you click through in the simulation, there's again that sort of series of messages over time. And then are they or are they not reinforced by an influencer? So I know I put at the bottom, there was an example of Oprah telling everybody, stay home, and everybody just starts jumping back to the left because everybody listens to Oprah, right? Right, there she is.
It works for books.
Yeah, so, but you can see that, and different groups of people are affected at different rates, depending on the message, the tone of it, where they received it, and whether or not it's repeated by influencers or people whose opinion they value, right? And we see how that on the right directly translates into how much people are moving around in a community. Is mobility increasing? Is it decreasing? And how does that translate into infection rates? And, in the upper right there, you'll see other data we're tracking, like, what is the bed capacity of that county or that region? And once you start exceeding the healthcare capacity to treat COVID patients, then you get an accelerator to the death rate, to both the infection rate and the death rate. And you can see how this actually plays out.
Yeah, and Richard, one of the questions, this one's from Samir. He says, has anyone contacted you to find out how to get more peeps vaccinated?
Yeah, actually, and we have a project on that right now in one of the states that we have our COVID dashboard capability. And it's interesting because it isn't here's just the one message that you have to do. It really is, the more you can tailor it to the communities you're serving. In this one state, they've grouped counties into these separate groups and said, here are the prevailing opinions in each one of these groups. Here's the vaccination rate. What do we need to do to convince? And again, it's really just what I'm talking about here. If you get the right influencers with the right messages, you do get a greater adoption rate, and opinions will change. And as we've gotten into the science of this, I've seen some really crazy stuff, like how you can actually, there's a Stanford study around if you can get opinions of a group of people to change dramatically, it actually changes physical reality. In this case, we really are changing physical reality because we're talking about reducing mobility for a period of time, increasing vaccination rates, with the idea of trying to eliminate this, swim past this pandemic onto a better reality. So, yep. So we have that under. So Samir, we're actually doing that right now, and that's again, it's a combination of a lot of the stuff we've talked about, including those choice model studies that we can then put into the personas and then say, if you talk to these groups of people, here's what you say, and here's who you need to repeat that message. And your adoption rate or your vaccination rate will go from this number to that.
Yep, absolutely.
And now we're getting into, this is the last concept I think here, but we're now doing this project. This is another CARES Act grant that we had that we're working on. It's the idea of actually your health record as a whole bunch of data that's feeding into you, into your health record, but it's not just the medical interventions you had, the prescriptions that you're taking. It's your health history, your genealogical information, if you have that, and then your things like wearing a Fitbit and other data streams, and then your life choices, your lifestyle choices around diet and exercise and environment, and being able to then give all of us control over our health record. I don't know how many of you feel that you do today, but being able to take this slider and say, if I answer a couple of questions about my behavior during a pandemic and my lifestyle, my exercise, et cetera, and I grab that little slider and I go out 10 years, 20 years, I can see things like, hey, am I still able to ski 20 years? Do I still have ability? Am I on a respirator? Am I on so much medication that I'm not really mobile anymore? Am I going to meet my grandkids? So it's that same idea of data feeding into these physiological models in this case, taking that in forward to look and see how that affects my future. So one of our guys calls it, the Tamagotchi of you, if you remember that from Japan, the old little electronic pets that people would take care of, but in this case, the pet is you.
That's right.
So we're looking at that around, again, population health, and we started looking at the 7 Indian tribes here in North Carolina, what's unique about their health journeys, how do we affect that? And really starting to dial into some actions we can take to improve health outcomes, which is something we're all interested in, because if we can just solve the sort of huge healthcare costs we have in this country, we could really take a big chunk out of the deficit just by fixing that. But you'll see a couple of screens after this, I think, around this idea. And I think another big idea around this 3D Biome concept is the idea that you should be able to have data which you can enter yourself and play with, like a simulator, but it doesn't go to your insurance company, doesn't go to your employer, doesn't go to your doctor or even your family unless you want it to. But you're able to have a layer there where you can really say, like, you know what, I'm going to try to be honest about smoking cigars and how many glasses of wine I have and how much I really exercise, and see what does that do.
Eating
and that
kale.
Just gives you that feedback that tells you, but it's not going to, again, you've got to trust it and not have that data go anywhere else. And we're very thoughtful about that model. All right, you can just click through these. I think there's just a couple more examples of this, but we're really excited about what we're doing here with UNC Pembroke in North Carolina around the 3D Biome. And then the ultimate idea around this is think about applying it to education. So we've always talked about personalized learning journeys for community college students or even K through 12 students. Imagine being able to have these models help guide, bring machine learning bots and mentors and that sort of thing to help guide students through their journeys, help guide our military personnel through their career, which we're already looking at. Because it's not just looking at, what skills do you have, what classes do you need, but also what's your mental state. You've already been deployed twice in Afghanistan, you've done a couple of jumps, your knees are hurting, you've taken some shrapnel. So what is your mental state, your physical state, and what training do you need to match up against the next mission in your life?
That's right. And we've got some customers, Richard, micro training is becoming and micro learning is becoming a very important part of their day-to-day journeys. It's tough to send folks away for 3, 6, 9 months to do full classroom type courses, and with YouTube at everybody's fingertips now and all the information that's out there, being able to see if a course would be, if my avatar thinks, this might be a good course for me to try to learn something, helps sift through some of that information. And again, at the end of the day, it's really trying to accelerate that learning and training process.
And I think that is the wave of the future. It's why I joined, I spent 8 years on community college board of trustees here, because I thought the 4-year college model just wasn't adaptive enough for some of the new skills we needed, like drone repair and 3D printing specialists and that sort of thing. But I think we are even getting down to the point where these micro credentials are really important. And again, I think even before that, even when I went through college, did my 4-year degree, 4.5-year really, much of my learning was informal. I think some people estimate that up to 60% of it is. So if you had this little sort of bot-like system that's guiding you on your own personalized learning journey through your life, I think that's really interesting. And you can see that in some old Neil Stevenson books like Diamond Age and others, the idea of the young lady's illustrated primer, right? This thing that adapts to you and is constantly trying to just optimize your life. Which street should you walk down, which sort of career should you have, and how do you learn about things, and what are your preferences for different media types. I think we're at a point where that kind of guided learning using this capability we're talking about can be really empowering.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I've got sort of that's sort of the 3D BioMe modern concept that we're working on.
Yep.
That's your health.
That's the health.
It's getting stretched out a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it did get stretched out a little bit. That's interesting. Okay.
All right. People get the gist, and there's your soldier. Again with the emotional, physical, and skills. And then if you're a platoon commander, do you want to look at, hey, I'm going to take my team, and I've got now. We're going to Africa we're being assigned to AFRICOM, and we're going to do some counter, insurgency work, and we need to work, or USAID work, and I need to get it, make sure everyone has new skills around how to work with an interpreter. But the idea is just take what was the current state of your people, match them up against a mission, and then have it reveal the gaps, and then start saying, okay, we need a little more counseling here. We need R&R for this person. We need some physical training, and we need some skills training so that we can match up against this need that we have. But if you think about how you can apply that, you can apply that to everything in life.
That's right. And we're looking to expand it with soldier readiness and some of those other areas of concern for the military.
Absolutely. Yeah, so those are the main concepts. There's some reading for you. And there was a book, I meant to put it on here. Someone just wrote a book. Oh gosh, I forgot the name of it right now. I have a whole bunch of them. He just signed them for me. But he just wrote a book based on the animated persona technology. It's a fictional book it's a murder mystery and all this. So it's very Crichton-esque, Michael Crichton-esque to me. But it's called Memories of, and can someone in chat help me with that? I could probably run and grab one really quick. We'll try to make sure it's in here, but it's Memories Live Here. Thank you, Will Jarvis.
There you go.
Memories Live Here is the name of the book by Mark Scheinbaum, Scheinbaum. Go get it on Amazon today. We have no interest or whatever in that, but I thought it was cool that Kevin Clark gave him a little briefing like this on the technology a couple of years ago, and he wrote a novel around it. And it's doing quite well. So that's great. That's cool.
All right, and that brings us to the end. Now's everyone's opportunity to ask some questions if they have any.
I'm not able to see I can pull up chat here.
Yeah, there haven't been any questions right now, Richard. Is there anything else that you would like to cover? A little bit of a
I feel
last-minute closing statement.
Yeah, I think that's really we've covered a lot of stuff here, but the one business model that I'm still pondering ever since I read, Doc Searle's book, The Intention Economy, is this idea of like, how do we control our own data? Now, what if I could control what the data says about me and who's using it? That's an interesting model, but it's like a lot of things. It's like, how many people turn on a VPN when they're out and about outside of their home? You have to pay, you should pay for that. And that gives you extra privacy. How many people care about turning location services off on their phone? If you've got location services on, all the other stuff I've talked about here about getting stuff from Nielsen and from your purchases, et cetera, that pales in comparison to the data that you're sending every day as you move around with your phone, right? That has location services on. I can tell a rich story of you based on where you go all day long, how long you spend at each place, how long do you sleep a night, and that data it's actually pretty cheap to get. But what if you could control your own data, have this persona of you, and then offer it to the market research world or to whoever, and every time they use it in a new study or in their own simulations, you get paid. So I've been talking to Reid Hoffman about that. Reid I know we're on LinkedIn here. Reid was the guy who started LinkedIn. He was an investor in my last company, the one I sold to Lockheed. And we've been talking about this for a while, but if you had a model where you control your own data, you're basically molding your own persona of you around these different subjects. And anytime someone wants to hire it for use in something, they pay you $1, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah,
I think that's really compelling.
Yeah, there is a question, Richard, around, and it's from Rick McGeer. He says, you might want to expand on the idea of persona-driven simulation, particularly simulation driven by the end user, as easily as you do what-if models in spreadsheets. Yeah,
I think that's interesting, because the whole idea around simulation, and one of the ideas I have, and I know you've spoken on my Simulation Century panel before, Alan, right, at Mod SimWorld, where I say the last century was about moving image. It was the first time in human history when we reflected upon current events and recent events by looking at footage of it. I say this century is about simulation. It's the ability to model, simulate, and predict the future. So a big part of simulation is that what if scenario. Like I said, what is Vladimir Putin likely to do next? And of course, there's an array of things he's likely to do that all have different weights next to them. But if you could sit there and tinker with that and say, what if this, what if that, and then look at the interaction with the world or with your simulated world to see what outcomes might come out of that. And you can do a kind of Monte Carlo analysis, right? And that's what we used to do at Lockheed, is you wouldn't run 8 simulations, you'd run 10 to the 8 and see how they cluster. I said, well, it looks most likely it's going to be somewhere. One of these scenarios is most likely what's going to happen. And imagine empowering everybody with that. What if you had that ability for your life? What if I make this choice versus that choice today? What if I go to that school or take this job or go to this place on vacation? Show me all the potential outcomes of it. It really can be empowering. And of course, it needs to be easy enough to do so that, you're not having to sit down and, I guess Rick was saying, work on your spreadsheet or build a simulation each time. It needs to be something where you can almost interact with it like Siri or Alexa and say, I'm thinking about these 3 options. What do you recommend, Siri? What do you recommend, Alexa? And get those 2 options and then make your decisions based on that. It's like when I was speaking in South America, in Medellin, Colombia, about this idea. They said, hey, I would love to ask all of my ancestors about every major life decision that I make and get their opinion. It's like, could you? Yes, you could.
Yeah, and I think just a time check, we've got about 5 minutes left. There is another question. This is an interesting question too, as well, from Ken Hubble. At what point can we start licensing our own personas so multiple companies can leverage our KSBs?
Really, that's what I was just talking about, that
Yep.
idea of, I think you can do it today, but I wouldn't take, I don't know if any of you've looked at your Facebook interest graph, but I wouldn't use that as my data feed, because it's not very, at least I've looked at mine and said, this isn't accurate at all.
Yeah, it's not even
because
close. Mine's not.
it thinks I love cats, but just because I've, liked pictures of cats from people who I like, but that's not really an interest of mine. I mean, cats are okay, but I'm more of a dog person. But yeah, I think we are at a point where you could refine that. We could offer it up. I mean, you wouldn't believe how much money these researchers pay just trying to do these polls and surveys, and they get flawed, inaccurate data. So I think being able to, take your, if you connected your grocery, very important customer card data to your Nielsen data to your Amazon purchases and a few other things, then maybe you could even take a quick look at it to just take out anything you didn't want in there and then offer that up and then be paid for it. I think that's a really interesting idea, but it is, it's one of those multi-sided market problems where it all has to come into existence at once for it to work. And that's what's, I think, holding it back. The model we have right now on social media is still the one from the 20th century, which is, monetizing human attention, like NBC and ABC and CBS did. That's how we've made the billionaires, not by, curing cancer and settling Mars, but by monetizing human attention. And
Right.
I think we can do better.
Yep. Yeah, and Richard, I think we have we've got time for one last question, and it's by David Rubberite. And he said, can you speak to some of the challenges orgs have when organizing data to feed a simulation or AI model? Is there a lot of pre-work? How should companies prepare?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of steps there. And I mean, let's just talk more broadly about, and maybe you can speak to this more from NCI, Alan, because you guys have, NCI has the big digit contract for GSA where we're helping the government do their digital transformation. But a big important step in digital transformation is first, where is your data? Do you have access to it? What form is it in? It obviously normally it doesn't reside in just one place. It's in a bunch of little lakes and pools all throughout the organization. Some of them dark pools behind firewalls. How do you connect all that data and have it be ingested by a machine learning system? And then, there are multiple ways to deal with it. Try to give it a utility function to solve for something specific, or just feed it into the system and say, find every hypothesis that might be true, which we like to do a lot more often. We call that the new scientific method of just that, letting the machine come up with what it thinks is interesting. But
that's right.
Ideally, I think successful implementations should not require a lot of prep on the data. And that's our assumption working with NCI and Tanjo working together on this problem is we assume it is going to be in a lot of little cubby holes. We don't require it be in one big data lake. And then the data, and then you have a bunch of specialized little enterprise brains or machine learning systems that are solving different kinds of functions that can ultimately all talk to each other.
That's exactly right.
That is the architecture that works.
That's
not easy.
That's our data ops lifecycle that we use all the time, and it's making sure that we can automate all those processes so we can take the burden off the customers.
Yeah, exactly. So we got to meet them more than halfway, and we do.
That's right. That's exactly right. Well, I think I do want to take time to thank you, Richard, for coming on. I hope it was entertaining for folks and a lot of interest in there. I want to remind people that this has been taped. It will be posted in a lot of different forums on our NCI's LinkedIn page, as well as some other areas. I believe there may be a YouTube posting as well. I encourage folks to go out there, take a look at it again. My contact information is on there, as is Richard's. Please feel free to reach out to us with any other questions. And, we look forward to speaking with you all again soon. Richard, anything else?
No, it's a blast. I really enjoy working with you, Alan, and NCI, and these are interesting times we're living in. So I appreciate everybody's attention and the follow through on all the questions.
All right, thank you, everyone. And with that, I'm going to close out our session, and I hope you all have a great afternoon. Thank you.